Now, over 4th of July weekend, UFC 251 just got a hell of a lot more exciting. And who better, Cavino, to bring on to Now or Never than our dude, Ariel Helwani. Ariel, thanks for joining us, man.
Oh, my pleasure, guys. Thank you for having me.
Oh, man, you're the best, dude. So UFC calls on Masvidal, short notice. Masvidal says he's kind of getting the money that he wanted, but Dana White gets the main card that everybody wanted. Plus, he's got Masvidal locked in for 10 fights. So my first question for you, the expert, is who got the better of the deal here, Dana White or Masvidal?
Well, it's interesting that you ask about those 10 fights because I actually spoke to Masvidal's manager, Makikawa, earlier today, and he said that Masvidal misspoke. He said that Masvidal actually just signed for that one fight. Like, basically, he got an addendum to his deal. He has a couple fights left, but it's not like a new 10-fight deal. That being said, I think everyone should be happy here because the UFC got the fight that we all wanted to see. They got the fight that everyone had been talking about that I was bummed that we weren't getting. Masvidal gets his payday. He gets his chance to finally fight for a UFC title. And Usman, credit to him for taking the fight on 6 days' notice, gets to fight his rival. You know, for Usman, it was a bit of an awkward situation. He was fighting a friend and a training partner, and now he gets to fight a guy who he hates. So I feel like everyone won out here, and I commend them all for actually checking their egos at the door and giving us all the fight that we wanted to see.
Now, is this a win-win for Masvidal? He's got his title shot. It's the guy he wanted, but his first big title shot is on such short notice. Is that the way he envisioned it going down?
I don't know if he envisioned it, but I don't know if he actually minds it as well. First, it's important to note that he was preparing to fight on July 11th, and it was only a month ago that they went in the direction of Gilbert Burns after they couldn't come to terms with Jorge Masvidal. So he was in the midst of a training camp. He had been preparing while he was negotiating. It wasn't like he was just waiting to get a deal and then would start negotiating. So he's in relatively good shape as well, and even his team tells me once he lost the fight, he had a premonition that something might happen, so he stayed in the gym. He didn't have a full-on training camp, but he stayed active and he stayed in shape. So in a situation like this, where you're taking a fight technically on 6 days' notice, everyone is happy that you're there. Everyone gives you a lot of props. If you win, it's tremendous. You're a legend. If you lose, everyone's like, hey, man, thanks for saving the day. You took it on 6 days' notice. Better luck next time. So I feel in this case, there's a lot more pressure on Usman's shoulders because he's the guy who's been in the training camp. He's the guy who called Masvidal a bum and all that stuff. And he's the one that has to, beat the guy who took a fight on 6 days' notice. If you lose, it's a bit of a stain on your resume. So I kind of feel like Masvidal comes out smelling like roses here, and everyone just loves him more because he stepped up on such short notice.
Yeah, I heard you talking to DC about this, and he's saying the pressure's always on the champion here. So if there's more risk reward for Usman, how does he make adjustments here on such short notice with the new opponent?
Well, again, Usman had been thinking about Masvidal for a while as well. So this isn't your typical short notice fight where the guy comes out of nowhere. I'm sure he's game planned for him. I'm sure he's thought of him. I'm sure he's done all of that. And at this point, I'm actually, I would think that he is lying if he says that he's not more excited to fight a Masvidal because he truly despises him. I mean, no one wants to fight a friend, right? But you want to fight a bitter rival. You want to shut that guy up. So, Masvidal's a different fighter. He's not Gilbert Burns, so the style is different. But these guys are pros. These guys, and how great is this? Him walking onto the private jet wearing that pink robe. I mean, what a legend this guy is.
Savage.
It's incredible.
Hey,
he's killing it.
I'm a gambling man. I know you don't make predictions, but Vegas has Masvidal like plus 225, plus 250, meaning for the non-gamblers, you could double your money if Masvidal wins. Is that a stupid bet or a pretty wise bet if you like going for underdogs?
I don't think it's a stupid bet at all. Jorge Masvidal is a really good fighter, and he's been in this game a long time, and this is his first time fighting for the belt, and I actually think he thrives under these conditions. Don't forget, when Jorge Masvidal was 19 years old, he was sitting in a drive-thru about to eat some McDonald's, and they called him up and said, hey, do you want to fight Kimbo Slice's protege, Ray, who was previously undefeated? He said yes, went over there a few minutes later, and he beat him. That's how his career started. So this guy, he's bred for situations like this, and that's partly why his nickname is Game Bred. He's always ready. He's always down to scrap. So I would not sleep on him. I know a lot of people think that Usman is going to ragdoll him and out-wrestle him, and Usman is the superior wrestler. But I think if he could catch him early, much like he did with Ben Askren a year ago this week, crazy things can happen in this game, and crazier things have happened. So I think he's a very live dog, and quite frankly, considering he's taking this fight on short notice, I'm maybe a little surprised that it's not greater odds against him, if you know what I'm saying. So 2-1 for me is not a bad bet at all, and it lets me know that Vegas actually respects Masvidal a lot.
Can't wait, man. UFC 251 is loaded. Let's talk Holloway Volkanovski too. We've talked about this before, but is there a game plan update? Is Max going to adapt? You know, Volkanovski's going to go after the legs. You know, how do you see this playing out the second time around?
Well, I love this fight, and I was blown away when Max told me last week that the first time he saw his coaches was when they were at the airport going to Las Vegas en route to Abu Dhabi. He said he did the entire training camp via Zoom. He didn't have any training partners. He didn't have everyone to spar with, to roll with, anything like that. And there was a part of me that was like, is he being serious right now, or is he pulling my leg? If he is being serious, you know, that could give you some pause. If he's not, then good for him. He's done some great promotion for this fight. He also told me that, look, Volkanovski hit him in the leg, like kicked him in the leg 80 times, 79 times, something like this. And he said at the end of the night, he was dancing. He was at his after party, basically shrugging off the fact that those leg kicks really did all that much. He said he struck him more in the head, in the body. And he feels like, you know, he should have probably gotten a little more of a nod as far as the judges' scorecards are concerned. So he doesn't sound all that, threatened by Volkanovski. But I'll tell you what, Volkanovski, man, everything he is saying, his tone, his demeanor, it feels like he's the underdog here. It feels like he's the contender. He's the guy going after the belt. He feels disrespected. He feels like no one really views him as the real champ, and no one's giving him credit for that win. And it feels like he has a point to prove. So I'm curious to see if Max adjusts, and I'm curious to see what kind of Volkanovski we see in there, because Max is a great fighter. Volkanovski's won 18 in a row against some really good fighters. So to me, I mean, other than the main event, this is the most intriguing fight on the card by far.
Ariel, Alex was on our show. Volkanovski saying that he thinks people may have underestimated his last performance, and because of the pandemic and everything going on in the world, he thinks people forgot that he whooped Max's ass.
Yeah.
I don't doubt it. I think he feels a little disrespected, and that could be a good thing. It could be a bad thing, right? If you have too much anger and frustration, sometimes you don't fight smart. But Volkanovski is a pro, and he's been some of the best guys at 145. Prior to Max, of course, he beat Max, but he also beat Jose Aldo and Chad Mendes, Darren Elkins. I mean, the guy's got a great resume, and he is game. You should respect him. If you don't, you're making a big mistake.
Ariel, speaking of Aldo, is this his last chance in the big time if it doesn't go well for him, or what?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you can make a case that he didn't deserve the title shot to begin with, to be honest. 0-1 as a bantamweight, 0-2 in his last two fights, but he's a legend, and, good for him. He's still, I think he's the greatest featherweight champion of all time. He held that belt for so long, and I know he lost to Conor, but he just put that division on the map, and no one has been able to rival him in terms of the length of his reign. And so here he is, one last chance against Petr Yan. Petr Yan, maybe not a household name just yet. Incredibly good, 14-1. I think he's won 8 in a row. No one's really touched him in the UFC. Just beat up a legend in Uriah Faber, which I thought was a mismatch when they booked it. They shouldn't have put Faber in that fight. This is a really tough fight for Aldo, and I think if he loses it, he's not going to go back up to 145 to fight for that belt, and I can't see him getting another crack at 135. So this, in my opinion, is his last shot at gold.
Ariel, let's talk Fight Island. Last time Volkanovski was here on our show, he was talking about how he's going to make adjustments, training, use heat lamps. If they're fighting outdoors, what sort of effect will this have on the fight, or any at all?
Yeah, so technically it's not outdoors. It's like sort of this makeshift arena / hangar. So like these photos are great promotion, but this isn't where the fight is happening. Like you're not going to see any of this. So I hope you don't buy the pay-per-view on Saturday thinking it's going to look like this. This is just promotional stuff, and it's great. Like people are sharing it. It's brilliant on the UFC's part. I'm not trying to be a hater at all, but it's just not quite what we're going to see come Saturday. It's going to be in a makeshift arena. It's going to be really hot. It's going to be in the middle of the night. Like the main card usually starts at 10 p.m. Eastern, and that's 6 a.m. local time. And that's when they're going to be walking out. They're going to be doing the card to cater to us here in North America. So I think that's really interesting as well. And usually at like 6 a.m. in July in Abu Dhabi, it's about 105 degrees Fahrenheit. And the last 3 times that they were there, they had some issues with air conditioning, and it got really hot, and fighters got tired and sweaty and sticky. So I'm curious to see how the elements, just because they're inside, it doesn't mean they won't be affected by the elements. But I hope no one's ordering the show hoping to see waves crashing behind the cage, because it's not going to look like that. Sorry to say.
What is it, Fire Festival with Ja Rule? Is it not what we're signing up for?
I'm here to tell you it's not going to be that. So listen to me. I'll never steer you wrong.
All right, let's talk about the pay-per-view itself. I was excited before this fight was added. So could this be a classic when we look back? Does this have all the makings of a classic pay-per-view UFC 251?
Well, especially if Masvidal wins, it will be remembered as one of the great moments. I mean, two of the greatest moments in the history of the sport happen on with short notice title fights. Nathan Diaz taking that fight against Conor McGregor in 2016, UFC 196 on 11 days notice. And then just a few months later, Michael Bisping taking a 2-week notice title fight against Luke Rockhold and knocking him out as well. Those are two of the most revered moments in the history of the sport. Could you imagine if Masvidal does this on 6 days notice against his bitter rival and finally, after 17 years in the game, gets that UFC title? It's an incredible story. So, I mean, even if the whole card is a dud and he wins, it will be remembered as an all-time classic. And you add the 2 other title fights, and then Rose coming back and Paige Van Zandt coming back. I can't wait. The main card is tremendous.
Yeah. Let's talk some trickle-down effect, the repercussions of UFC 251. What's the next biggest fight? Because Cejudo recently here on Now or Never was calling out Sugar O'Malley. He was calling out Volkanovski. What do you see happening in the future? What's going to be the biggest fight?
In the aftermath of the card?
Yes.
Well, if Masvidal wins, I think he'll call out Nathan Diaz, and I think he'll want to run it back with him and do the rematch of the BMF title fight. So that would obviously be a big one. If Usman wins, I think they'll probably go back to the Burns fight, which is, of course, interesting as well. Although I think that they should do Gilbert Burns versus Leon Edwards for the #1 contender fight. If Volkanovski wins, there's interesting options out there. Maybe a Korean Zombie as a beat Magomed Sharipov if they win their next fight. So those are obviously big names. If Petr Yan wins, I mean, there's Aljamain Sterling, who I think should be next, and O'Malley is climbing up the ranks. If Rose wins, I think she could be next for Zhang Weili, the strawweight champion. And if Paige Van Zandt wins, she's a free agent. So there's a lot of pressure on her. She's trying to score a big contract. So maybe this is her last fight in the UFC. Maybe she signs with Bellator. Maybe the UFC has second thoughts and re-signs her for big money. She's been talking about money a lot these days. So there's a lot of pressure on her shoulders. So every single fight on the main card, in my opinion, has an intriguing storyline attached to it. And as a fight fan, what more could you want?
Ariel, every time the name Conor McGregor comes up, people smile. It's exciting. Is there a chance that the winner of Usman Masvidal takes on Conor McGregor?
I mean, there's always a chance with Conor because he gets to play by his own rules. But right now, I think he's more focused on 155. This is a 175. Maybe if Masvidal wins, maybe. But I think Masvidal goes in the direction of Nathan Diaz. So, of course, we want to see what happens with Khabib. And it's a terrible thing that happened to him. And I just want to send my best to his family. And I know how close he was to his father. And it's really heartbreaking to see what happened to his father late last week. And so I spoke to DC, a good friend of his, and obviously a training partner. He said he doesn't know what his future holds, and he can take as long as he wants. All respect to Khabib. He doesn't have to prove anything to anyone. So, maybe his timeline changes now and Gaethje fights Conor. I don't know. But I think that Conor stays at 155 and tries to go after that belt.
Well, it's going to be exciting. And by the way, how do you watch it? You just sit there? Do you tell everyone to get out the room? Do you grab a pen and take notes? Like, what's your method like?
So obviously life has changed for me, right? Because I have to watch them from home, at least for now. This is the first July, so historically the UFC does cards around July 4th weekend. They don't like to do them on July 4th. So this week they're doing it exactly 7 days later. This is the first one in 12 years that I won't be at. So I'm a little bit sad. But here I am. I sit in this master control room. To my right, I have the camera where I do SportsCenter. This is my computer where I write stuff. To my left, I have my TV. In back of me, I have my radio device where I jump on the radio. It's a lot of fun. I'm wearing shorts and slippers, and I'm talking about the greatest fights on earth with the greatest athletes. And, I feel so blessed to be covering this sport because unfortunately some other sports are still having a little trouble getting off the ground. And here we are talking about Masvidal walking on a plane with a pink robe and short notice fights and all this stuff. I mean, how lucky are we? So I just hope everyone's healthy and everyone's safe and we get this card. And it's just a reminder how great sports are because it's the ultimate escape valve. And Lord knows in these times we can use a little bit of an escape.
I feel you, man. I want to watch this with friends, so I just may order a bunch of bubble suits that we could all just sit in our own little bubble outfits. Camino, you down for that or what?
Dude, I got a hazmat suit in the closet. I'm ready, bro. Let's do this.
This weekend, thank you so much as always for your time. Ariel Helwani on Now or Never.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.